Oh. Okay, so for initial materials, we're going to need 2 Tupperwares of sand, 1 white, 1 black. We're going to need a pole. I have it already set up like this. We're going to need 2 clamps, 1 of each of these kinds that we're going to use to hold up the light bulb in the socket. You need a light bulb in a socket, a heat shield, and then a LabQuest and a light sensor that looks like this. And so for our initial setup, what we're going to do is we're going to take our right angle holder, bring it up and over the top of the pole. We'll clamp this end down. And then what we're going to do is take a clamp and we're going to fit it into this opening right here. This is going to slide in like this. And then we will clamp this down like that. So it should be able to hold in nice and tight, just like this. Make sure that that holds so that your light bulb doesn't end up dropping. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to plug in our socket into our heat shield. We'll screw in our light bulb. And then we're going to clamp it on just like this. So what you want to make sure is that the switch right here, you're able to turn it off and on. So you need to clamp it in like this so that the clamp isn't on the switch, that you're able to flip the switch on and off like that. So that should be set up well. The last thing that we're going to have to do before we plug it in is measure it out so that we have it set at the appropriate distance. Okay, so once we have our setup like this, all we have to do is measure it out with a 1/2 meter stick. So I grabbed a 1/2 meter stick and we're going to measure it out to about 40 centimeters. And when I say 40 centimeters, you're talking the base of the heat shield. That's more visual. So you don't have to worry about where the light bulb is. We're going to think 40 centimeters from the base of the heat shield. So it looks like I'm pretty close, but I do have to adjust it down just a little bit. And so I'm going to pull on the knob here, lower it a little bit, and make sure that I'm lined up at 40 centimeters. I'll plug it in. What you want is the white and the black sand to be roughly equal distance from the light. So we want it to be centered so that the light bulb is centered at the middle of the white and the black sand. So you take your hand maybe and try to get a rough alignment between the light bulb and the 2 Tupperwares of sand so that it's right down the middle. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our LabQuest device. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to plug in our light sensor. We should be getting a reading now, and then what I want to do is I want to set the box on my light sensor to 0 to 6,000. So make sure that you have this set 0 to 6,000, and then that should be good. We're just going to set this off to the side for now because we will be using this in the middle of our experiment. Okay, so before we turn on the light and start our experiment, the first thing that we need to do is we need to pull out a FLIR camera. So our FLIR cameras, we have 2 options for this. They look like this one right here and this one right here. The silver one is a newer model. It has a little bit of higher resolution, and it's also got an extender that makes it so that you can plug the FLIR One camera right into your lightning port on your iPad without having to take off the case. This is an older model. It does basically the same stuff. It works with the same app. Nothing should be different except for the fact that this one does not have an adapter, and so you're actually going to have to take your iPad out of the case if you end up using this one. They both work just fine. You should get the same data. For the purpose of this lab, we're going to be using this one, but you don't necessarily have to use the newer model of camera to make this lab work well. So what I'm going to do is load the FLIR One app, and then I'm going to plug in my camera. Big thing is to make sure this does have an on button. Make sure that you press the on button, and it does take like 15 to 20 seconds to turn on. So if you see a red light right here, that doesn't mean it's out of batteries. Make sure you wait 15, 20 seconds. And then when it's on, it should look something like this. A couple things that we need to do to set this up initially. If you look at the buttons up here, the button that kind of looks like a crosshair, we're going to click that, and that should give us our temperature data. So you are able to just physically move this around and get temperature data, but the nice functionality of the FLIR One app is that after we take pictures, you're able to manipulate the crosshair and move it anywhere along the screen. So you'll be able to get data of both of your objects with just one picture. So let's go over to our experiment. We'll make sure that we have this set up right. So again, this is just to double check. This is set up so that we're at 40 centimeters from the base of the heat shield. And then we're going to make sure one more time that we're lined up right down the middle with our white and our black sand. Okay, so I'm ready to take my initial picture. So what I want to do is I want to aim my crosshair down the middle of the two Tupperware containers. Before you take your picture, you have to hit this button up here by the battery symbol. This is our calibrate button. So you got to let it tick. It ticks about 3 times. You can actually hear the camera. You won't be able to hear it on the video, but you can hear it when you're doing the experiment. It looks like it's refreshed now, so our camera is calibrated. We're aimed down the middle. You don't need to take an individual picture. What we want to do is take one picture, aim down the middle like this, and then you can go into your photo library. You now have this picture stored, and what we can do is click this button that looks like a pencil up on the top right, and now you can move your crosshair around to take data. You can take data anywhere along the picture, but what we want to do is take data from our white sand and our black sand. Make sure that another functionality of this is that you can pull down on this image and you can actually see the live image, just so you know if you store these images later which one was which. But so we know that this is our white, we know that this one's our black. And so we'll load this up, and you can now record in your lab sheet the initial data for the white and the black temperatures. And they should be roughly the same. If they're off, you should call your teacher over so that we can take a look at that. They should be roughly the same temperature. Okay, so what I did was I took my 2 numbers for my initial picture for the black and the white, and I just wrote them into my lab sheet. So your lab sheet should look something like this. Obviously, you're not going to have the exact same numbers, but your sheet right now with the starting temperature before you run anything should look exactly like this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn the light bulb on. What you want to do is you want to set a timer for 90 seconds. So we're going to run this experiment over 90 seconds. We have the light bulb all lined up, so we should be good to go. And what we want to do is turn the light bulb on, start our timer for 90 seconds, and at the end of 90 seconds, and you kind of have to be quick about this, at the end of 90 seconds, you're going to take a picture immediately, and make sure that you calibrate that. So we'll come back in 90 seconds so that you can see that. I'm going to turn the light bulb on right now, and we should be good to go. Okay, and remember we had our light sensor set up at the beginning of this experiment, and so what we want to do now is while our experiment is running, or this also works after the experiment has already ran, is that while the light is on the 2 colors, we want to take our light sensor and we want to point it directly at the sand. And so I'm seeing about, and it is gonna fluctuate quite a bit, but I'm seeing pretty close to 2000 here, and then I'm gonna move it over to the black sand. And you're gonna record these values in your data sheet. So again, this can be done during your 90-second experiment, or it can be done after the experiment has already ran. So I'm seeing a pretty huge difference. The light sensor is picking up and quantifying the amount of light that's being reflected off of the surfaces of these 2 objects. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna compare our lux value to the actual temperature change of the 2 sand containers. Okay, so it's been 90 seconds. So what I'm gonna do, make sure you calibrate again, let it tick 3 times, should refresh. This looks good. I'm gonna take a picture right now. So now this is our final picture. We can store this, and again, we can go up to this pencil button, and I can look at the difference. What you wanna do is you wanna find roughly the hottest temperature that's near the middle edge of the 2 containers so that we know that that's where the light was focused, and we wanna try to roughly find where the hottest point is. And then what you can do is you can transport those 2 data points into your final temperature reading right here. The temperature change is just going to be the final temperature minus the starting temperature. And then we will write down the reflectivity values that we found while the experiment was running as well. Okay, so now that we have our data for the black and the white temperature, and you should have that whole table filled out for your black and white, starting temperature, final temperature, temperature change, and your reflectivity values. Once you do that, we are going to run this experiment 2 more times with different colors. So we have a bunch of different colored sand containers, and what you're going to do now is you're going to create your own color comparisons between all of the options that we have for this lab. So in the front of the room where you found your black and your white, you put your black and your white sands away. You're going to take 2 at a time. So I could take red and blue. You don't have to do that, but you're going to take 2 colors and you're going to bring them back to your lab station, and we're going to run this same experiment 90 seconds, and you're also going to take your light values. So make sure you get a before picture and after picture, and you take lux values, and we're going to do this 2 times. So you pick 2 different colors, and you don't want to repeat. So if we pick red and blue the first time, we're going to take those out, and you pick 2 different colors for your second time. So there should be a bunch of colors up in the front. Grab 2 at a time, and then bring them back when you're done. We're going to run 2 more experiments after the black and the white. That should be all for our procedure. Make sure you clean up and put away all your parts. Make sure that the FLIR One camera is back in its charger. Make sure that the LabQuest is back in its charger, and that all your equipment goes in the appropriate place. This is our reflection of light lab. Thanks for watching.